Welcome to our new exhibition of paintings by Jenny Westbrook. It's called The Girl with Kaleidoscope Eyes.
Jenny, welcome to Church Stretton. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you, it's lovely to see you too.
So why is it called The Girl with Kaleidoscope Eyes?
Well, in my work I reference 60s and 70s music quite a lot because whilst I'm involved in my work, I'm remembering times in my youth when I had a great time, and I'm also playing the music which feeds into what I'm doing because it's one abstract thing feeding another.
Lovely. Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they say if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there, don't they?
I do. Somehow I can relate to that, but
yeah.
I wasn't.
But I think the work, it does, it is reminiscent of the 60s, the bright colours and everything.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, so there's no escaping it really, is there?
Yeah. Tell us about the work. So there's a lovely piece behind you now. What's that called, and where did that come from?
This one's called Take 5, and whilst I was doing it, it's a recent one. I've done it in July, and whilst I was doing it, I just thought to myself, I could really do with listening to Dave Brubeck. I haven't heard that for so long. I think I caught it on 6 Music once, and then I thought, I must get some. So I got some, and I really got into it, and it really fed into this painting. It helped with the colours and the shapes and the composition, everything about it.
Really interesting.
Yeah. I either play music or I put the radio on, but sometimes I get to a point where I need music in order to brighten the whole painting up and just to get it going and give it a bit of rhythm, I suppose.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. And how do you know when a painting's finished?
That's a tricky one. Because I can have it on the go for ages and it'll be up in my studio and I'll keep looking at it thinking, is it there? It's nearly there. And then I'll get to a point where I think, almost there, and then I'll come in the next day and I think, that's lovely, but it's not quite there. And I'll sit down for a few more hours and I'll just kind of, bold up the paint a bit and crisp up the edges maybe, put a bit of art pen in here and there, and maybe put a tiny bit of neon colour there, or take the colour from one end over to the other so that it takes your eye across the painting and ties it all up. And then I'll leave it alone. I get a good feeling from it and I'll leave it alone, and I'll go make myself a cup of tea or pour myself a glass of wine, depending on whether it's 5 o'clock or not. And I'll come back and I'll say, hey, you've done a good job there, it's finished.
Oh, brilliant. That's the spirit. Oh, when you can say that.
So when I get a message, basically,
yeah.
it's like somebody else in my head is saying, you've done it, it's there.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And you don't ever feel you've overdone it?
Yes.
Sometimes you do?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Sometimes I end up by cutting them up and then underdoing what I've done.
Right.
And making them into smaller paintings.
Right.
It's part of, I don't feel bad about that. It's part of my process.
And tell us what it's like in your studio and what the setup is and how you go about putting stuff on the canvas.
Well, it's chaotic, and I do clean it up sometimes. I've got paint everywhere and I always forget to put the lids back on, and I ruin quite a few brushes and I feel very guilty about that. And but then I have a tidy up and it's absolutely jammed with paintings.
It is, right.
Yes.
Yeah. And what else is in the studio apart from the paint and the paintings?
Well, I have little figures of kind of vintagey type toys and weird clockwork things. I suppose I ought to take some photos and
Yeah, that would be nice.
Send them to
If you send us some, we'll put them on the
Yes.
website. That'd be good.
Well, I used to be a dealer in 20th century, mid-century objects.
Right.
Not a very good one. So I've got a few things like that left over, and for some time I was painting those, but I kind of moved on a bit and went a bit more abstract. Everything feeds into your work. When you look out of the window and you see the shapes of the roof, the roofs and the chimney, that feeds into my work too.
Ah, so what is the view from the window?
Well, it's another street. It's a couple of streets and lots of roofs and telegraph poles. And I quite often look at my work afterwards and I see telegraph poles, roof shapes, you know, hybridized versions of bins left out on the street and stuff like that.
Do you ever paint outside the studio?
No.
It's always in the studio?
Always in the studio.
Is it always in the same place in the studio?
No. Sometimes I take it downstairs and sometimes I just want to sit on at my table and just work on a few smaller bits at the same time and have the telly on.
Right.
And maybe the radio, or swap it to a bit of music. But sometimes you just want to take your mind away from engaging with it too much and just go into autopilot and soak in what's going around in a kind of domestic setting, to give it another kind of feeling, I suppose.
And would you say over the years that your style has evolved or changed, or have you gone through different periods, or are you doing the same sort of thing now as you were 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, there are things in my paintings that I recognise in paintings that I did about 15 years ago. The same kind of iconography turns up every so often. The ladders, for instance, I do. And I don't necessarily want to go into the psychology of it because I don't really know. I think it would put me off if I knew what it meant.
We'll leave that to the art historians later on.
And the shapes and definitely colours, but I can see that they've evolved. I've become more confident in what I do, and I think I've sorted out the composition in a much more effective way than I was doing about 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, I think, looking at the paintings, I really think you have. I think that they are lovely, and I just hope we get lots of people into the gallery to see them.
I hope so too.
Thanks very much, Jenny.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
I think that'll do. Is that enough?
That's brilliant.
Ooh, not too